I grew up in Chicago, Illinois, on the west side. And in this particular neighborhood, I was walking distance to Cicero, Illinois, where Al Capone had been operating for many years and was still having a following there. The street I lived on had two steel companies on it, and a lumber yard was across the street. There was an abandoned house, and it was in very bad condition. And I was told that when I was born, my cradle was a dresser drawer. And so those are the circumstances of my beginnings. And David Williams had similar, not similar, but kind of rough circumstances when he was born, too, because their first house was a half dugout on the prairie with a sod covering over it. So he and I had kind of a rough start in life. I attended Austin High School. I worked my way through. A man who had been a boxer and was now making boxing gloves employed the girls of our neighborhood in the sweatshop he had in his basement. That's where we earned our little spending money, 25 cents an hour, cutting the leather, sewing the leather, stuffing the... I could make a pair of boxing gloves now. I still remember how to do that. But anyway, so I was doing that until high school. I attended Austin High School, where I took business courses as well as courses preparing me for college. And I worked after school at Woolworths. And then when I graduated from high school, I took a year off to work some more and got enough tuition to attend college. And I applied and was accepted at Purdue University, where my interests were to follow interior design. So I was always interested in art and design and even architecture. So that was a special time for me. And that's where I met my future husband. And we married, well, I was a junior in college there, and we came to Park Cities when he took a position at SMU after he completed his PhD work. And that brought me to the history department to continue finishing, so I could finish my degree. Hal Williams was the chairman of the department at that time, and he was interested in historic preservation. He had lots of ideas and came to the American Institute of Architects chapter here in Dallas to pose to them an idea he had of getting students interested in doing research on architects who had been working here in this area and in Texas in general. And the AI at that time was considering that something along that line that they were going to pursuing as well. So the two groups, Hal Williams and the history department and AIA, were able to come to a meeting point on this, and Hal Williams suggested that they would give him the name of an architect, perhaps that had been prominent in this area, for one of his students to begin to research and write a monograph, perhaps. And that opportunity came to me, and I was very pleased with that. But at the time I was working on my thesis, a master's thesis on the Spanish Inquisition in Latin America, as cases relating to women, so that was a big jump for me. I set that aside for a while and began to see what I could find out about David R. Williams. The only thing I could find on him was the obit. He died March the 10th, 1962, and there was much information there. I got his wife's name and the names of some architects that he had worked with, and so I began to contact these people and do some oral research with them. And little by little, the group of people that I was talking to suggested persons that they knew that had worked with Dave, and that's how the roots for this monograph began. It took me 6 months to do the research and write it up, and Hal presented it to the AIA, who found it acceptable, and they wanted to pursue it, perhaps in adding more information by having perhaps other architects having architects join in forming a committee to meet with me, and they would be able to draw floor plans of houses that I would be looking at, that I had researched as being work David R. Williams' work. And then in addition to that, we also were given a photographer that would go to these houses and shoot photographs. And all of that then pulled together, the text and the photographs and the floor plans, were able to form a good size work. And the AIA said that they would fund it, and they did. But they never went on then to, as far as I know, to have other students work and research other architects or other subjects. I think it started and ended with me, as far as I know. We named the book David R. Williams, Pioneer Architect, because his background, his family background, was that they came as pioneers to Texas. And they lived on the plains near Childress. They didn't have a home there, but they dug a hole in the ground and built what constructed what was considered a half dugout with a turf for a roof. And that's where these two little boys, David R. Williams and his twin, born, and I think there was another child as well. And I think he inherently, because of that, had an interest in architecture and having fine homes as a part of his life and history. Dave attended University of Texas and studied architecture, but he never finished the degree. He qualified for it, but he left a little before that and went to Mexico and earned money there working with the oil companies, building lots of different things with his architecture background. And that gave him the opportunity with that money to go to Europe, study architecture there. And then when he came back, he said, here in Texas, we have houses that look like Spanish haciendas or Italian villas, and we should have our own style of architecture for the Southwest. And he dedicated himself to working on that idea. And he had a protege at that time by the name of O'Neill Ford. And they decided they would get in a old Packard car. I think it was 1938 or something. Maybe it was much earlier than that. And they would travel all over the Southwest, studying what kind of houses the earliest settlers built. And that would be the roots for the regional style of architecture that they would build on that. And they did this for a couple of years, I believe, and did lots of notes and drawings and took photographs. And out of that, Dave developed his theory, not theory, but his idea for a regional style architecture, indigenous, he called it, for this area. The house where we're filming today is the Elbert Williams house, and it was probably what we must call the culmination of the work that David Williams did here in Dallas especially, and also Corsicana and other parts of Texas, developing his style. The Elbert Williams house was such a wonderful example of all of the research and studies and travel that David and O'Neill Ford did together. And it's all pulled together so beautifully to become this house, which has been acclaimed as probably the most significant residence ever built for Texas up until that time. It has all the elements. He incorporated the elements that would be important to a house in this area, how it was oriented to the site in order to catch the breeze in the summer, and but not the sun as much. No glare from the sun, and also using natural materials that were from this area, woods, bricks, lots of glass for the winter, to let the sun in. After O'Neill Ford and David and O'Neill Ford had toured Texas, Dave set up an office here in Dallas, and with that, also a residence. And that residence came to be known as the studio. It attracted interesting characters from other fields besides architecture. For example, Dave Williams and Stanley Marcus started a book club, and it was mainly of miniature books, which are now in the Bridwell Library at SMU. Another person was Goodson Borglund, who would, when he would come to town, would stay with them, with Dave. He's the one who did the famous Rushmore Monument in the Dakotas. Another was Stokowski, the composer and conductor. And there's a unique group of people, and all having different interests. And they were also party people. They partied a lot. And one anecdote along this line was that the city of Dallas was having a annual art ball. It was called the Beaux-Arts Ball, and Dave and his group went there. It was a costume party, and although this was in the middle of Prohibition, the alcohol was flowing very fully, and there was an officer on duty to see that things didn't go out of. He was supposed to be seeing there was no alcohol, but he himself was enjoying it, and the ruckus came up after a bit, and Dave Williams and a couple others were brought to court, brought to the station, and had to answer for themselves. This came because a fight had started. And this event became known better, not as the Beaux-Arts Ball, but the Booze-Art Brawl. And when he was let out of jail for however time he was there, hours, I think no more than that, they had, of course, taken everything out of his pockets, and when he was retrieving his goods, he chastised the judge vociferously, saying, "Some of my pencils are missing now." He usually used little tiny short pencils, and he was quibbling over this fact that he wanted all his little pencils back. So it was kind of a funny story. We know of several houses that Dave Williams built that are still standing. In the Park Cities, the Ray McDowell House, the Morton Biggers House, the Elbert Williams House. In addition to the houses that are still standing in the Park Cities, there are other houses that he built. For example, he built a house for his brother, Ray Williams, and that's in the Lakewood area. And then another was the Ray McDowell house on Mercedes. It is in Dallas. Of course, my favorite house, and the one that not only I would consider best, but architects everywhere, and also the AIA and the others who have studied architecture feel that it's one of the best houses that was ever built in Texas, and that would be the Elbert Williams house. And the reason being that he incorporated all the elements of his developing style in this one house. It's a very large house, a beautiful house with wonderful textures of wood and brick and stone, and the way it's oriented to the property is all good, very perfect examples of and the last house that Dave built. When the Elbert Williams house was completed, the owners decided to put a metal awning on one of the windows, and when Dave would come by and look at his houses from time to time, when he saw that, he was furious, and he asked them to take it down but they said they like that and they need that in a particular location. So, but an argument ensued, but eventually Dave won out, and they did take down that metal awning. In another case, another house, a very large tree had been planted in the front lawn. It was a cypress tree, and it was an object not to be desired as far as Dave Williams was concerned. But rather than get into the arguments with the owners, he just came in the middle of the night one night with a truck and not a truck, I think it was the touring car he and O'Neill Ford had used, attached a chain to it and just dragged the tree down, and I think they then drove it in the middle of the night to White Rock Lake and threw it in there, and that was the end of that. He was a very interesting man. It was a wonderful opportunity to write about him and to know about this man. I would encourage everybody to read the book because it's the story of a very interesting person and other things that he did in his life. For the government during World War II and in so many other ways, building housing for airfields as the war was ensuing and we needed to have more air power. The Matanuska project up in Alaska where he built housing there and people were taken off the streets from Washington where they were living in poverty and given a new life up there. So many other things that he did with the youth group and something like the WPA. What was that organization? I can't remember the name of that, where they were building state parks, putting buildings in state parks, and they still stand in many of these parks.